If you like rental income, and who doesn't, short-term rentals can be a way to really 10x that income. So that's what we're going to talk about today on the Sub2Deals Show. Hey, Sub2ers, welcome to this episode of the Sub2Deals Show, where we talk about all things subject to. Now, occasionally we'll talk about different real estate investing topics, but it's always something to help you with your real estate investing business. If you're listening to us on Apple or Google or any of those other podcast mediums out there, we'd like to invite you to check us out at our YouTube channel. You can go to sub2tv.com and see our smiling faces and actually watch our podcast. We release a new video just about each day, something to help you with creative finance or some other aspect of real estate investing. And if you're ready to learn more about creative finance, go to our website at sub2deals.com. Guys, I've been teaching real estate investors. I can't believe it, but it's been almost 20 years now. We've got courses, coaching, free articles, and all types of resources there to help you with your real estate investing business. And if you're looking for coaching, I guarantee you we've got the most affordable coaching on the planet. Go to $7coaching.com, and for $7 a month, that's the price of a latte. And I know you guys are out there in that drive-thru at Starbucks all the time spending $7 on a coffee. For that price, we'll teach you creative real estate investing. If you find a better deal out there, let me know, because I want to join. Guys, today we're going to talk about short-term rentals. We've got an expert here that's been an active investor for over 20 years and been doing short-term rentals for, almost that long. Shawn, welcome to the Sub2Deals Show.
William, thanks for having me, man. I'm really excited to have a conversation with you today.
Yeah, same here. You know, I always like to talk about rentals. My students know, and anybody that follows me know, I'm not a landlord. I'm more of a lien lord kind of guy. But there are so many benefits to owning rentals. And I know we're going to talk about some of that today. But first, tell everybody about yourself, how you got started, and why you're an expert on short-term rentals.
Yeah, I've been, like you mentioned early on the introduction, I appreciate that. I've been in the game for about 23 years now. It's my 23rd year as a full-time real estate investor. Never got into and started off owning any sort of long-term assets. I was more the fix and flip guy, development, doing a lot of development deals, fix and flip deals for a good portion of my early career. And I met a guy at a real estate investment club meeting, and he put his arm around me and said, "Hey, Shawn, you got to quit referring to yourself as this big time investor. You really have a job fixing and flipping houses." And at the time, I was making good money, and it hurt my feelings. My ego was shot a little bit. But he said, to really be an investor, you've got to have assets that produce passive income. And I that kind of took that conversation to heart. Luckily, I had that conversation in my early 20s, and we were getting early on in our career. But like you just mentioned, I wasn't really attracted to being a landlord. And I actually went out and I did buy a bunch of single family rentals. I ended up having 53 rentals in the early to mid 2000s. We built up kind of a little bit of a portfolio of long-term single family rentals. And I just didn't like the game. It wasn't that they were bad investments by any stretch. It just wasn't my cup of tea, if you will. And I really liked I like putting deals together. I liked working on development deals, fix and flips, things like that. And I ended up stumbling across, and I got involved in a development deal on the high-end resort style communities, right? The second homes, really high-end though, like $25, $30 million homes. And these were all second homes. And that kind of got me introduced to the resort world and the second home world, if you will. And at the time I bought a vacation home, and unbeknownst to us, this development deal we were working on, one day the feds walked into the office. There was about 9 of us, and locked up all the computers and the file cabinets, and everything got shut down. The majority owners of that resort got indicted on securities charges. And we were sitting there in the middle of a development that we've been working on for quite some time. And it was shut down. It was over. And I ended up sitting and throwing myself a 6-month pity party and blaming everybody and everything except for actually taking any responsibility and doing anything. So I sat on the couch for about 6 months and really just was mad at the world, and until I lost everything. I lost everything that I owned except for a vacation home that I had. And at the time we were putting on Craigslist and renting it that way, but this home was doing really, really well. And it was also doing really well from 2009, 10, 11. And if anybody remembers the real estate market at that time, it was tanking. And this property was cash flowing really well. And I was thinking to myself, at the time there was a little bit of a light bulb that went off that I might like this asset class. But had to start recovering, got back into the development stuff for a little while. And then just as I got older, I started thinking, hey, there might have been something to that. And back in 2012, 13, 14, we started really diving into short-term rentals as an actual asset class. Now they're super popular right now, the last few years, right? We know that short-term rentals with COVID have just, exploded onto the scene as a really preferred accommodation. But we were doing it for quite some time before that and really getting excited about it as an asset class. COVID really accelerated the maturity of this asset, and now it is a very mainstream asset class. And we've had a lot of fun getting involved in it. And what it allows me to do, I'm probably one of the only guys out there that teach anybody how to do anything with short-term rentals, that I don't manage any of my own properties.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, I don't like managing properties. And so
Right.
we have to make sure that we can hire the best management companies and the properties underwrite to be able to do that. But by doing so, we've got some really good assets and have a lot of fun with this asset class.
Right. Sounds like it. Well, listen, for anyone that hasn't, maybe that's new to investing or not very familiar with short-term rentals, what is the definition of a short-term rental?
Yeah, technically the kind of the most agreed upon definition is anything that rents for 30 days or less is considered a short-term rental. So nightly rentals are the most common when you think of Airbnb, Verbo type properties. You're renting them by the night, but weekly rentals, anything less than 30 days is typically considered a short-term rental. And then you've heard the term midterm rentals, and those will be like those 30 to 90-day contracts, typically. Right. Traveling professionals or nurses, and they're usually furnished properties that are rented for a shorter period of time.
Right. Okay. I was just curious. I know, Jody and I, as we talked off camera, we traveled for almost 2 years just doing primarily the midterm. Now, a lot of people on Airbnb or whatever, and actually a lot of the ones we found were on Airbnb, but they will let you rent 30 or 60 or 90 days. Yeah. And we stayed in a lot of those. They discount pretty heavily and they're still fully furnished. So I was curious, if it's less than 30, it's really a short-term rental.
Yeah. And then that 30 to 90 day mark would be considered kind of or even up to 6 months, and kind of a midterm rental that you're like what you're saying, you'll stay in them and you can get nice discounts. And it's nice for those owners of short-term rentals sometimes to have a little bit longer term tenant.
Right. Gotcha. Now you talked about luxury homes. We just got back this week from a mastermind. We do a mastermind with our Sub2 Max students. We actually rented a 12-bedroom in Branson on Table Rock Lake. Beautiful place. I mean, this place, gosh, it had game rooms and pool tables and an indoor pool and just all kind of stuff like that. So obviously for most, and correct me if I'm wrong here because I'm not a short-term rental expert, but for most short-term rental owners, that's going to be the exception. So when we're talking about a typical home that a student of yours perhaps would buy for a short-term rental, what's the ideal property to look at for that?
It's a great question, William, because it's really across the board and it really is market specific. Like Branson's an area that you get a lot of bigger groups. You get a lot of family reunions. It's not always like what you guys used it for, is kind of a corporate retreat where you were going and having a nice mastermind. But those big, large properties can work really well, and the small little one-bedroom cottages can work well. And it really depends on the market. Most markets, there's a pretty good crossover, but I would say on average, most of our members are, most people are buying those. When you think of bread and butter type of homes that you would typically call a bread and butter type of a home as an investor that you're going to buy and flip or whatever, there's that same, that's the same rule applies to short-term rentals. There's that, maybe it's the $300,000 to $500,000 property that somebody can go use, and it's a 2 or 3 bedroom that in a nice vacation market that a family can go rent together. But the sky's the limit. And those big, massive properties versus the little teeny 1-bedroom cottages, they can all work really, really well. What's more important with short-term rentals is, do you have a target audience that's coming to an area that you can set up a unique experience with, and that house can be part of that unique experience? And who is the target audience? Is it a big multi-generational family? Are they corporate travelers? Is it a couple's romantic getaway? And that's going to steer you to what size of property you're going to be looking at as well.
Right. Okay. So what are the pros and cons of short-term rentals? I mean, I know I look at some of these numbers people throw out, and they say, well, this house typically, if I bought it, it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And I talk about those primarily because that's what I'm used to.
Sure.
But they'll say, okay, we can cash flow after we pay management, mortgages, tax and insurance and repairs. We can cash flow $300 a month. But if I use it as an Airbnb, I can cash flow $2,000 a month with a certain percentage occupancy. So, but other than that, well, what are the pros and cons of those?
Yeah. And I think that actually brings up some of the cons with it as well. That, like, just that statement right there, there's a lot of people that look at properties and assume, well, it's always going to make a lot more money as a short-term rental. That's not the case. Mm-hmm. One, short-term rentals have a lot higher expense. Their expense column is a lot more than you'll find on a long-term rental. So what typically people will do when they make those types of comments is they assume that, okay, the revenue is a lot higher and the expenses are going to be about the same, so my gap of income is going to be a lot more. That's not the case. Your revenue is going to be higher, but so is your income. And so, is it true that you can make more money on short-term rentals? Yes, but it's kind of looking at the highest and best use of an asset, just like any other asset, right? Sometimes it's better to use it as a long-term rental, and you're actually going to get a better return as a long-term rental. It's not across the board that short-term rentals make more money. They take more time, right? They're usually going to cost more money to get set up because you got to furnish these properties. You're not only buying them with your down payments and everything else, you also have to furnish them. And so you've got those extra costs to furnish them and set them up. You're typically buying them in more expensive areas. They're going to be a little bit more expensive areas that you're purchasing these properties. So your out-of-pocket expense can be significantly higher than a long-term rental. They're going to take more time. If you get involved at all in the management side, they can turn into a second job really quickly if you're managing it. But if you're not managing it, management on a short-term rental is going to be closer to 30%, where on a long-term rental, it's 8%. Like that's a good example of, okay, just management alone, 8 to 10% versus 30%, you better be making more money, right? To cover that.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of misconceptions out there that no matter what, it's going to make more money as a short-term rental. That's not the case. And I think that there's a lot of people that don't really understand the underwriting. Short-term rentals are tough to underwrite, and because there's a lot of moving parts.
Right.
It's really easy to underwrite your debt service, your fixed expenses, all that stuff. But there's a lot of variables in there on expenses with management and cleaning and all these different things, but also on the income. You've got nightly rates that are fluctuating, occupancy that fluctuates, seasonality that you have to figure in and deal with. And so with all these moving parts, sometimes we miss the mark on underwriting, and it's been really confusing for people because the last 3 years having a short-term rental was like having toilet paper during COVID. Everybody was making money. Right. That's not the case that was a blip in time of in this asset class of like, okay, the supply and demand gap was huge and there was way more demand than there was supply. So everybody made money. Right. That's caught up now, right? Markets are more saturated, and they're going to stay saturated. It's a mainstream asset class now. So now you really have to understand all those moving parts. And unless you do, it's not worth getting into the game, because we talk to people all the time that say, I got in and I thought this was going to make me a lot more money than it did. Their gross revenue is huge, and everybody talks about gross revenue. And as an investor, gross revenue sounds really good, but that's not what you're putting in your pocket at the end of every month, right? And so we have to look at the net, and very few people talk about the net.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And of course, if you're like me and you're an investor, you're on Facebook, you're in these groups, you're watching what people talk about. And one of the most dangerous things, and I want to get your take on this now, because I know when Jody and I first started our traveling, we would say, hey, we want to go to New Orleans. So we would jump on the websites and look for an Airbnb in New Orleans. And there might be, at the start of our trip, there might be 10 that met our criteria. By the end of our trip 2 years later, if I went to the same city, there might be 200 because everybody's jumping on the short-term rental bandwagon. But I see these people in these groups, and they'll talk about, especially with creative finance. Well, I can buy this house with creative finance. I can get it with very little down and not qualifying for a loan. But the payment's high. It won't be a good long-term rental. Long-term rental rates are $1,500 a month, and the payment on this house is $1,800 a month. And these people will jump on, oh, just use it as a short-term rental. It'll cash flow for you. You'll make plenty of money. I'm thinking, man, that is so dangerous to do that.
Yes, I totally agree. And it's one of the things that frustrates me the most out of this game. And it's because of the popularity that short-term rentals have had the last couple of years, that everybody thinks, one, you got a lot of keyboard warriors, a lot of people that give advice that they have never actually done it, right? And so we have to all filter through that no matter what we're dealing with. And unfortunately, it's a game that honestly has covered up a lot of mistakes for a lot of years. The market has definitely shifted. This is any mainstream market. That Pareto principle applies, where the top 20% of the market makes 80% of the money. And so if you don't know how to be able to operate toward the top of the market, you're probably not making a lot of money. And there's a lot of things you have to look at underwriting. And that's one of the biggest myths out there. And it's a dangerous myth to think that, okay, I can just turn it into a short-term rental. I'm going to be fine. That's not the case. And I wish I could scream from all the rooftops to get people to understand that, hey, take a step back and really identify if this is the asset class that works for you. I love them, right? We make a living doing it, but it's not, there's pros and cons like anything else. And you have to understand how to play the game.
Sure. What are, just with using that as an example, being uneducated and saying, well, I can't cash flow as a regular rental. I'll just use it as a short-term rental and I'm going to make plenty of money, and you just move merrily along with that. But what are some of the more common mistakes that you see new people coming into this space make?
Yeah. The biggest one is not understanding the numbers, not underwriting it. And we've kind of beat that horse dead, right? That is by far and away the biggest mistake. Right. The second mistake is a lot of people assume they forget about what we're actually selling. And I try to explain this to people. When you're in the short-term rental game, you're not in the housing business. You're in the experience business. You're in the hospitality space. And so if you're going out and getting in this game and trying to sell a house, now the house can be part of the experience, but you've got to be able to sell an experience. We don't vacation to go check out houses. We can go visit a local realtor and go look at houses if we want to be looking at houses, right? We vacation and rent properties like this for the experience. And I think that a lot of people, not just newbies, a lot of experienced investors that have been in this game don't realize that we have to sell the experience, not the house. And I think that that's a key differentiator between the people who really succeed and the ones that don't.
I know when I look at Airbnbs or look for a place to go, some of these that are the most unique, they're so customized to, like if you go to Tupelo, Mississippi and you find one that's Elvis everywhere, things like that. That's really a smart thing to do with your just regular 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses, don't you think?
Absolutely. You're right. You have a target audience, what the profit drivers are, what they're coming for, and you set the property up to be part of that experience for them.
Okay. So what do you think is the best way to finance short-term rentals for maximum profitability?
It's interesting. We've always I understand creative financing very well. I use it all the time. Like, we've been in the game for a long time. I think if you understand creative financing, what you teach your students, William, with subject to deals and those things, I think that's a phenomenal skill set to understand as an investor. Most of our students are getting traditional loans, DSCR loans, because the last couple of years it was inventory is really, really low on our side of the game, right? And it is kind of across the board, but to try to find a good deal that cash flows, we have to be able to have financing in place and move forward. I actually think that now, and I've been talking to our students about saying, hey, go find, and I love pointing them in your direction, go find somebody that can really teach you this skill set, because as owners are getting into this game and the market's shifting around a little bit, you're going to have the ability to go get some creative financing, find some subject to deals. When I started off in my career, I got really good at understanding lease options, and I bought a lot of properties with lease options, and it was a tool that I had in my tool chest that it was really, it helped me grow my portfolio really, really fast. And so I think that there's a lot of options, and 100%, if an investor doesn't understand creative financing, they should go research it, find some mentors that understand how to do it. And because I think it's a phenomenal tool, especially as we're going into the shift.
Oh yeah. Taking over. We bought 3 houses last month, all of them with interest rates 3.5%. No investor can touch rates like that out there. And also, what about, and that reminded me of something. I used to do sandwich lease options when I first got started. Now, I got tired of that pretty quickly when I discovered Sub2s. But what do you think about the arbitrage for renting a house and then using it as an Airbnb? Is that something that you guys do?
No, it's not something we do. And I don't think it's a bad side hustle, but that's really what it is. You've got to be able to become the management company in order to make the numbers work in an arbitrage type of a deal. And I just think there's too many benefits to ownership. If you're going to, I've never understood taking the time and the effort and not actually owning the asset. And so to me, that there's the main benefits are in ownership. And so we actually don't do the arbitrage co-hosting model. And a lot of people do. I don't want to say it's a bad deal. It's not a bad side hustle if you understand the game, but that's really what it is a side hustle. It's not an investment.
Right, for sure. Okay. So you've been investing now for 23 years. Yeah, you've done all types of things in the beginning. What really made you settle on short-term rentals? Because that's pretty much what you do now.
Yeah. It came down to be, I had kind of I was actually working on a development deal in Hawaii. I have twins, and we take them to Hawaii every week for their birthday. And when my twins were turning 3 or 4, we were on the beach, and I was working on a development deal. I was really frustrated, and I was kind of having one of those times in life where I lost everything. I built everything back up, and everything was just kind of a hustle. I was just going 100 miles an hour. It felt like kind of missing out on a few things in life, and the kids were growing up, and I was frustrated. I got off the phone, and my 3-year-old, he grabbed my hand and he said, "Dad, if real estate's, he might've been 4. He's like, in his words, if real estate sucks in Utah, why don't you just sell it here in Hawaii? Because Hawaii is way funner." Right. And so, if you're not liking it in the area where, cause he knew I was frustrated. And at the time he didn't think anything of it, but I was in this point in my life where I really sat down and thought, what do I really want? What do I really like? And I loved the resort side of life. And I loved investment properties and building portfolios of investment properties. However, I didn't like these huge portfolios, right? And so I had already had the experience with my cabin that did really well during the turn when I lost everything. We had already kind of been exploring this asset class, and I really liked buying properties that I was excited about. And I could set up and we could use them. My entire portfolio, I buy properties, I call them lifestyle assets, because we use them personally, right? We don't just buy investment properties for the investment purpose. We buy them because we want to use them. So we've got the financial and lifestyle aspect, and it's an asset that we just have a lot of fun with now. And because of that, and because they're fairly lucrative for us, we've stuck with it and just enjoy it.
Right. Okay. All right, I'm curious. You brought up your kids and taking them to Hawaii and things like that. It reminds me of when I first got started investing. If anybody knows my story, I was in the restaurant business. I had been for 20 years and managed several locations over an entire state and worked 70 hours a week. And what really drew me to real estate was because I didn't have time with my family.
Yeah.
I missed all my kids' activities. I think when I got into real estate, they were 7 and 4. So they were at an age when they were doing a lot of stuff and you don't want to miss those things. But I see so many people even today getting into investing, this theme of hustling and grinding 24/7 and all that stuff. And I'm like, man, you can have a great life with real estate and not work. In fact, we do what we do for freedom.
Yeah.
How do you find that your investment strategy works with your family life?
Yeah. That brings me back to the previous question of why I really love short-term rentals.
Mm-hmm.
One, because my family enjoys them and they get involved in what we're doing. My kids are buying a couple of properties this year and they're analyzing deals and we do it together as a family. Mm-hmm. It also allows us that freedom. Like you said, like we always focus on the money, right? We always focus on, okay, how much money can I make or what am I going to be doing? We feel like we're chasing that dollar. Mm-hmm. We all want to make a lot of money. We all want to, have a great lifestyle. But at the end of the day, what good is the money if we can't spend, if we don't have the time to do anything, right? And so for us, like my kids are homeschooled. We travel around a lot. We're all, my kids have been exposed to lots of different areas and things that I was never able to do as a kid. And it's because of that lifestyle freedom that we've created, right? We do the things not just for the money. The money allows us to pay the bills, but find an asset or a job or something that you can go toward that actually it isn't a 24/7 hustle and grind. Mm-hmm. We work hard, right? There's like everybody, we put the time and the effort in, but guess what? We do it together as a family because we enjoy it. We really have fun with this asset. When I say we have fun with it, my whole family gets involved in it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I love about short-term rentals for us is it's really kind of a family business and we all enjoy it.
Yeah. That's great. Another thing I want to ask you about, because anytime you go into something, even something that's risky, if you know what the risks are, you can make an informed decision on whether it's the best thing for you. One of the things that concerned me about short-term rentals, especially people that base whether or not this is a viable investment on using it as a short-term rental alone, is that it seems like these days local governments are so unpredictable in there. Guess what? No more short-term rentals. And we're not even going to grandfather the ones that are in. I've got a student right now who owns several in New Jersey a couple of years ago when they just shut it down. And overnight, all of his short-term rentals had to go to long-term or he had to sell them. So what do you think about the future for short-term and what can we do about any of these things to protect them?
Yeah, the last couple of years we've seen sweeping regulations hit the short-term rental game. I mean, it was the wild, wild west for a while, mm-hmm. right? You could pretty much, there were very few municipalities had addressed the issue, and now they're saying, okay, this has become really mainstream. We've got to identify where we want them, where we don't want them, how we want them to operate, and that's what we're seeing across the board now. I've been talking about the way that we invest because we do want to mitigate risk. We do want to make sure that we can, avoid those things happening down the line. And for a long time, there was this big gray area. They didn't disallow it, but they didn't allow it. And a lot of people bought properties in these gray areas. And so what we've always done as investors is we only buy properties in the areas that it's allowed and that mm-hmm. they have specific rules and regulations, licensing, permitting, zoning for short-term rentals. Well, the last few years, like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, that was hard to find because there was most areas hadn't addressed the issue. Now you're finding way more areas where that gray area, that's a pretty small area now. Most areas have addressed it. Now, I'd be really curious because what most people say is I wasn't grandfathered in. I was operating legally. That's true, but they probably didn't have any rules and regulations saying we've got specific zoning and permitting for it because those areas usually will say, okay, we're not issuing anymore, or there's going to be a moratorium on them, but the people who have them are still good, right? But what happens is that gray area as rules and regulations started to come in, there's a lot of people that got squoze out and they lost it, and they said like they can't operate anymore.
Right.
So for us, we only purchase properties that already has zoning and regulations in place that is favorable for short-term rentals. Does that discount and rule out other areas? Absolutely. But I've developed land from a couple decades, and I can't go put a commercial property anywhere I want. I have to have the right zoning. I can't go put high density housing anywhere I want. I've got have the right zoning for it. We treat short-term rentals the same way.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So that's just part of the due diligence process.
Absolutely.
Where you can put these things and where they go. Okay, cool. Great information, Shawn. Tell everybody about your podcast. I know you've got a great podcast out there. You share a lot of information, and tell everybody about it and where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find us on anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. It's called the Vacation Rental Revolution Podcast. We talk about all things vacation rental investing. My goal with that is just to have people walk into this asset class with their eyes wide open, right? And, the good, the bad, the ugly. We have a lot of guests on there that talk about their journey into short-term rental investing and the ups and downs of it. And so, yeah, if you're interested in short-term rentals, we'd love you to check it out. And anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, it's called the Vacation Rental Revolution.
Okay. And I know you've also got a website, which has got a fantastic offer. They can come over, get a free video training and a free book.
Yeah. Go get a copy of our book. I've got a best-selling book. It's a bestseller on Amazon, and you can go get the hard copy on Amazon, but you can go to my website. It's vodyssey.com, VODYSSEY.com. And you can get a PDF download version of that. And that takes you through kind of our view of this asset class and what ownership really looks like. I've got a 9-step process that we follow that takes you through the acquisition phase, the setup and management phase, and ultimately the marketing to stand out in these crowded markets. And that book, What the Hell is a Lifestyle Asset, is available for anybody that goes to vodyssey.com. They can get a downloaded copy of that.
Okay, awesome. So guys, go over there to vodyssey.com, check out Shawn's absolutely free video training and get a free copy of that book. Okay, so go check that out and listen to his podcast. I took a look over there. He's got, gosh, you're working on 100 episodes now. I think, do it.
Yep.
Of some really cool training. If you're interested in short-term rentals, definitely go check that out. Listen, Shawn, it was fantastic information today. I'm fascinated by these things. I'm afraid to be a landlord. I really am. I'll tell you, I was a landlord the first 10 or so years of my investing. But every time I talk to somebody about these, I get tempted.
Yeah.
Into it for sure. But thanks so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me. I know how valuable your time is, the listeners' time is, and appreciate you sharing it with me.
Okay. Thanks so much. Okay, guys, that is it for this episode of the Sub2Deals Show. We really appreciate you joining us here. Remember, subscribe to our YouTube channel, sub2tv.com. You can watch all of our videos that we release and watch our podcast. But you can also listen to us on Apple. And if you do check us out on Apple, we would love it if you would give us a 5-star rating and review. It'll help us and it'll help other people find the podcast. So make sure that you check out Shawn's website, vodyssey.com. Get a free copy of his book and his video training if you're interested in short-term rentals. So until our next episode, get out there, talk to some sellers, and buy some houses.